Someone had taken the rig, the one thing the settlers needed to build a home of their own. But along the way, they kept leaving supplies for the ones who fell behind. Why help the column and lead its goal farther ahead at the same time? Owen pinned the capsule to his side with his elbow and put the signal onto the common audio. 3 short strikes, a pause, 2 long ones. A few seconds later, the pattern repeated. That was how the settlers kept time when carrying heavy sections. 3 pull, shift grip, 2 take the weight. Now the signal was coming from a damaged relay on the route of Vess's column. Owen took the capsule off its mount. The seal on the dark casing was still intact. He could reach the nearest working beacon faster than the column, if the old markers held. At the exit from the control room, the rhythm broke off. Owen had already stepped onto the strip when the next beacon answered up ahead. 3 short, a pause, 2 long. The source was not stuck in the relay. Someone was carrying it forward. Owen quickened his pace. He caught up to the column from the rear. The settlers moved in tight, linked teams, holding the cargo platform steady through the turns. The light markers under their feet came on late. Sometimes the safe path split, and one of the lines went dark only after people had already stepped onto it. Vess was far ahead. Owen lifted the capsule above his shoulder, but a platform loaded with shared tools wedged itself between them. Its left support scraped across the surface. Kell stood at the hitch, trying to free a jammed wheel. "Drop the load," Vess's voice carried back. "What are we supposed to build shelters with later? Our hands? If you stay here, you will not need shelter." The forward group kept moving. Behind Kell, 4 root lights went out at once. The remaining ones flared across the strip, pointing into the wall of an old lock. Owen looked at Vess pulling away, shoved the capsule under the straps of his jacket, and turned back. "Who are you?" Kell asked. "The one who did not come for you. Push." Several of the rear guard turned after him. One of them shouted that Vess had ordered them to keep formation. "Then keep it without us," Kell answered. The rhythm repeated ahead. On the 3rd short strike, the old lights blinked to the right. After the pause, 2 more came on, already closer to the beacon. Owen waited for the next repeat. "We move only on the strikes. In the pause, we stand still. The markers say different. The markers are late." Kell struck the platform fastenings with the handle of his wrench. 2 side frames dropped onto the strip. The load sagged, but the wheel came free. They moved after the lights. Once, the rhythm arrived before the marker flared, and Owen barely managed to stop Kell by the shoulder. A moment later, the old line went dark right under the platform. They reached the beacon by the long bypass. Part of the rear guard was still strung out behind them, keeping the distance between linked teams. Vess waited by the open panel, tapping his fingers against the casing in irritation. Owen took out the capsule and handed it to him. "The seal is intact." Vess checked it with a single glance and tucked it under his chest strap. "You split the column." Kell came back, so did the tools. "And the rest?" Owen pointed to the flickering lights of the bypass. "They know the way." Kell would stay and guide them through. Fresh scratches shone on the inside of the panel. Someone had recently moved the jumpers by hand. The metal still held the heat. Beneath them, a short phrase had been written in the Settlers' Trail dialect. "Bring the full group to the next point." From deep inside the beacon, the work rhythm sounded again. Then the transmitter fell silent, and the same pattern came from farther along the route. Vess closed the panel. "They're trying to hold us up. We move now. They're asking for everyone. Then whoever wrote that can wait." He pointed Owen to a place beside him. Kell was already turning the platform back toward the stragglers. Owen left him the bypass diagram and caught up with the forward group. The capsule was with Vess now. Behind them, a stretched chain of root lights flickered, and ahead, someone was beating out the familiar rhythm again, carrying it on to the next beacon. Packages lay around the beacon in narrow rows, pinned to the surface by mesh straps. Vess cut one strap and threw it to the nearest people. "Take power and food, as much as you can carry without losing pace." The settlers quickly stripped the first row, but after that the work stalled. Every packet was marked with the sign of a specific cargo link. Owen walked along the stores, matching the marks to the ones he had seen on the column's platforms. A share had been left here for Kell, for the rear guard, even for the linked teams that had not yet reached the bypass. "If you load the forward group with all of it, you won't get far," he said. "We're not taking everything," Vess cut in. "The rest will be found behind us. If the straps don't split first." The outer packages were already sliding toward a gap in the surface. 2 settlers pulled the netting tight. Then the woman with the bandaged wrist joined them. She took her trail bag off her shoulder and set it beside the stores. Vess noticed. "We're leaving." "Then leave," she answered, still tightening the knot. "Kel will bring the linked teams." Someone had to hand them their shares. 3 more carried the packets they had been given back under the netting. One started building a protective side rail out of empty frames. They did not ask permission, and they did not argue. They simply chose the work that kept them in place. Vess looked over the thinned-out group and ordered the load raised. The transmitter inside the beacon beat out the familiar pattern. On the last long strike, the sound stretched a little, as if a hand had lingered on the lever. Vess turned sharply. The next repeat sounded the same, the short strikes dry, the second long one with a barely noticeable break at the end. "Sair," he said. Owen waited for him to go on. "She used to lay out my crossings, knew how to distribute a load and when to change the hauling links. That break stayed with her after her hand was injured. So she calculated the stores." Vess looked at the people reinforcing the netting. "She knew my column's pace." He took out the capsule and brought it to the transmitting node. The dark shell trembled in his palm. A pale stripe moved across its surface, flashing in time with Sair's strikes. Owen touched the seal with the tip of his finger. "There's a link, but the capsule could not be opened here. It needed the right node, or the single-use tuning would be wasted." Vess immediately tucked it back under his strap. Behind the beacon was an empty platform with crushed support marks. Broad traces of removed fastenings darkened the surface. Vess crouched beside one and ran his palm along the distinctive groove. The Hearth Rig. Owen had only seen diagrams of modules like that before. They were transported to a chosen site so settlers could start their own protected camp. Without the rig, the valley remained a temporary camp, dependent on other people's networks and other people's supplies. "Sair took it?" he asked. "She took our home." 2 trails led away from the platform. The narrow one went farther along the beacon route. The other was wider and deeper. The heavy transport had stopped often, tearing up the surface with every new push forward. Owen lowered himself beside it. "This cargo is going the same way. It's overloaded, and it's moving slower than Sair." Vess straightened. "Then we intercept it first." The ones left with the supplies fastened the last net and were already making room for the incoming links. The forward group moved along the deep rut. Fresh breaks in the surface were still shedding crumbs of coating, and the distance to the heavy transport closed with each hard push it made. The transport stopped sideways across the ascent, almost sliding back into the forward group. Its traction supports bit into the surface. The body jerked and froze. Sair's rhythm was still coming through its transmitter, demanding the next push. Vess was the first up onto the side platform and struck the cargo hatch lock with his palm. "Open it. Where's the rig?" The hatch lifted to the width of a shoulder. Instead of a mounting frame, Owen saw faces. Settlers sat between the crates, holding them in place with their feet and locked hands. Their clothes bore marks from different columns, some old, almost worn away. The operator leaned out of the cab. "Sair gathered us from the side branches. Some were lost on the crossings. Some were left waiting for transport that never came back. She gave us the machine and brought us here by the beacons. Anyone who can keep a fast pace, get out," Vess said. "The rest will wait for the rear links." No one stood. A man by the hatch caught a crate as it started to slide. "We already waited, each of us on our own. There's nowhere to wait here. One more slip and the machine goes over on its side." The operator jumped down and checked the traction support. "It doesn't have enough power to reach the ridge." Owen noticed familiar sockets under the protective cover. The forward group's energy modules would fit them through a standard coupling. He called the operator over, and she understood at once where he was looking. "We can get it up," she said. "After that, your modules will be empty." "Do not connect them," Vess ordered. "We need speed to the next beacon." Owen was already taking off his own block. 2 settlers beside him silently handed him theirs. The others hesitated until a crack came from inside the compartment. One of the mounting braces had folded under the weight of the crates. 4 more modules landed on the surface. "Owen, if we leave them here, Sair's trail breaks off with them. You're deciding for the column again." The operator snapped the last coupling shut. "Now we either pull, or we lose the machine and the power you gave up." Vess let out a sharp breath and ordered the hauling straps handed out. The transport moved with a heavy lurch. The forward group pulled from outside, while the passengers, under the operator's commands, shifted toward the rear wall, easing the load on the front supports. Just short of the ridge, the right traction choked. The body drifted toward the edge. "Wait left!" the operator shouted. Owen let go of his strap, jumped to the right coupling, and threw his weight onto it with 3 settlers. Inside, the people shifted at the same time to the opposite side. The support caught again. The transport tipped over the lip and stopped on level ground. The indicators on the removed modules went dark one after another. Vess gathered those who could still travel light. "The Hearth Rig is ahead. I'm not ordering anyone to drag themselves after me. Anyone who wants to make it, we move now." Several of the strongest took off the empty blocks and stacked them by the transport. Others stayed beside the passengers. The operator was already inspecting the overheated traction. Owen went up to Vess. "Leave the capsule. I'll bring them to you." Vess held it in place under his chest strap. "You spent our move on this group. Then you'll get them to a place where they can move on. Sair is ahead. That's why the capsule goes with me." He led the volunteers toward the next beacon. Their steps quickly dissolved beyond the ridge. The operator showed Owen the transport's nearly empty accumulator. "We're not climbing any farther." Owen looked back, toward the supplies, Kel, and the cargo links that had split apart. In the cargo bay, people with different marks from old routes were clearing the passage and fastening the crates again. The straight chase was over for them. Now he had to build a road out of the people it had left behind. Sair was waiting beside the rig, with the traction struts sunk into the loose soil of the valley. When Vess came up, she flipped back the protective shutter and freed the connector. "Put it in. The node won't touch the seal without a command." Vess set the capsule into the socket. Light arcs rose around the rig, marking out the future shelter zone. A transmitter mark appeared on each one. Vess found his own, then the marks of the volunteers. Beyond that, the light broke off. "Where are the rest?" "Where you left them." He touched the far arc. It did not expand. The node had already divided shelter, power, and places among the people standing in the valley. "After I open it, can I add beacons?" "No. The capsule will remember this group. For the others, the way in will close." The volunteers crowded at the edge of the light. One command remained before launch. Vess took out the capsule and checked the seal. By then, the transport operator had turned the machine toward the descent. "We barely need traction," she told Owen. "What charge is left goes to steering and brakes. If you want to climb back up again, walk." The passengers demanded to return to the supplies. There were people there, and power, and a beacon. Owen asked who wanted to stay on the platform and wait for Vess. A man from the cargo bay rubbed the shoulder rubbed raw by a fastening strap. "I've already waited long enough for the ones who went ahead." The machine rolled downhill. On the first turn, the overheated right support failed to retract and caught the surface. The body slewed sideways. The operator hit the emergency release, freed the support, and held the transport at the edge, spending part of the charge she had been saving for the final break. "Now we stop once," she warned. "Choose the place well." The Hearth Rig rose onto its traction struts again. Sair was securing the connector for movement. "You could have told me the condition at the first beacon," Vess threw at her. "Then you would have opened the capsule before you heard the answer. All I heard was your rhythm, because I carried it farther. The rig will move once the beacons gather a shared work rhythm. Every camp can join in from where it is. There is no need to bring everyone here." Vess tucked the capsule behind the fastening on his chest. "I'll give them time. Not all the time we have." The transport stopped beside the supplies. Kel had already brought in some of the links. The keepers were handing out marked packages. Owen went to the beacon panel and asked them to open a transmission back. "What do we send?" asked the woman with the bandaged wrist. "An offer. Whoever wants to take part in the launch should repeat the work rhythm. They do not have to go to Vess. They can stay here. Obeying him again is not a condition either." Kel leaned on his wrench. "And if someone keeps quiet? Then there is no answer. And you won't write them down as agreed?" Owen held his hand over the transmitter. "I won't." The woman switched on the beacon, but did not tap out the signal herself. "We'll pass on the question. We won't answer for the other camps." The first request went out through the old network. The far relay caught the pattern and carried it back, toward the groups that had earned the right to decide, without Vess's command and without Owen's promises. The answer came from the transport platform. The operator switched on the transmitter, and the passengers beat the rhythm on the wall of the cargo bay. After that, she added, "We're leaving the machine here. We'll service the section. We're not returning to Vess's ranks." The woman with the bandaged wrist repeated the message to Owen word for word. He moved it onto the common channel without changing ranks to column. Next, the link teams out by the far bypass answered. They promised to keep the beacon running in shifts and give the network their excess power. Their camp, meanwhile, would stay where it was. Kel wrote the condition on a broken piece of side frame. Work together, commands separate, he read. That how you're sending it? That's how I'm sending it. Why should they trust you? Owen looked at the dead modules by the transport. They don't have to. I already chose the road for other people. Then I spent their power when there wasn't time to make a deal. The keeper pushed the transmitter toward him. That's why we hear every message first. Owen agreed. After several transmissions, the beacon stopped swallowing the ends of the signals. The answers went on through a steady chain. One camp received the rhythm, added its own condition, and passed it to the next. The last section answered with a sharp break. The strikes came mixed with crackling, then the connection cut off. Kel pieced together the rest by hand and frowned. The group at the first beacon had kept its share of power, but refused to connect it through the damaged link. They demanded that Vess come back and restore the section near them. We can send that he'll consider the demand, the keeper suggested. That isn't what they asked for. Owen sent the condition through the short windows when the line came alive. Kel listened to the recording all the way through, and only then allowed the repeat. I can handle it from here, he said. Go, before your beacon drops out again. The Hearth Rig was already leaving the valley. The traction struts stepped over the ground slowly, but without stopping. The light arcs trailed behind it, and, one after another, accepted the marks from the distant camps. Vess stood by the open node. Most of the marks burned steady. A gap remained where the first beacon should have been. Owen gave him the condition without preamble. They want you to come yourself. You didn't promise them anything? No. Vess took the capsule off his chest. For several moments, he held it over the empty socket, then reached it out to Owen. You'll wait for their answer. The seal stays intact. Even if the rig leaves the valley. Owen took the capsule in both hands. Even then, Vess turned to the volunteers. Whoever stays at the node stays. Whoever comes with me, take only light and tools. He did not assign the group. 2 settlers stepped toward the rig. 3 checked the fastenings on their road lamps and followed him. The rest split between them after short conversations, without an order and without a common formation. Sair lifted the traction struts higher. The rig moved toward the valley exit. The open socket passed close beside Owen. He could have inserted the capsule while the node was still within reach. Instead, he tucked it under his straps and followed Sair. Behind him, Vess was already descending toward the chain of beacons. Ahead, the usable ground was running out. The gap in the far light arc stayed dark. Sair turned the front struts across the slope. The rig tilted, and Owen braced his shoulder against the node casing, holding it above the stones. A few more steps, and it won't be able to anchor in the valley anymore, Sair said. Decide. Under the protective cover, the empty socket remained. Owen took out the capsule, checked the seal, and pressed it back to his chest. Guided along the network, Sair shifted the weight onto the rear struts. The ground sank under them, and the rig climbed onto the firm strip. The light that had circled the valley only moments before stretched into narrow segments along the beacon route. The place behind their backs went dark. The far transmitter came alive through the crackle. At the damaged beacon, Vess held the connecting plate, while 2 settlers removed the melted mount. The woman from the first link told him to lift the edge higher. The wire won't reach like that, Vess said. It will if you give up your road pack. He took the power source off his lamp. The light on his shoulder went out. They pulled the wire through the empty mount, pinned it with the plate, and connected Vess's pack. The beacon shuddered, but held the current. Vess leaned toward the transmitter. Support will reach every camp. No one has to return to my line for that. He stepped back. The settlers brought the saved module to the connection themselves. The woman checked the plate with her palm and snapped the coupling shut. The work rhythm went through the network. Kel was the first to catch it. The metal knock of his wrench passed through the beacon by the supplies. At the transport platform, the passengers answered along the wall of the cargo bay. Farther on, the camps by the bypass joined in. One by one, light marks appeared on the rig's stretched arcs. The far point flared last. The socket in front of Owen opened. He did not move. The chain is ready, Sair said. Vess is still coming back. The rig kept stepping along the edge of the strip. Sair held it side on to the route, and every new strut left a deep pit behind. There was no longer enough room to turn back toward the valley. Vess appeared without his road light. The ones who had helped with the repair walked beside him. The group at the beacon stayed behind to service their section. When he reached the node, he looked at the full chain of marks. Did they confirm the terms? Every camp sent its own. Sair opened the distribution connector and set her injured hand on the lever. Vess touched the capsule casing. Start it for the whole chain. Owen inserted the capsule into the socket, and only then broke the seal. A pale strip on the shell flashed and slipped inside the node. The casing turned gray and empty. The light around the rig broke into separate sections. At the beacon by the supplies, a protective edge rose. The transport received power. Support lights came on at the far bypass. Sair pulled the lever. The rig slowly turned and started back along the working chain. Owen walked with it as far as the first relayed section. When he returned, Vess was already standing at the edge of the next crossing. The road in front of him was clear, but he had not gone. He waited until Owen came up, and only then stepped on. Behind them, the moving beacon advanced at an even pace toward those who had been left behind before.